via WeChat or follow us on the newsletter so that you could get the most updated events information from HYSTA. And we will start shortly. Okay, yeah, Daph, you're back, and Lake.
Yeah.
And Lily, if you're ready, you can come back and we will start the session now.
Yep, we're back.
Okay, yeah, so are you ready?
Yes, we're ready. I can see Lily's background represent East Coast and I'm represent West Coast.
Yay.
And Deb represent home.
That's really awesome. And also thanks Lily for staying up. I know like it's almost like midnight. Really appreciate that. Okay, so now let's start. Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's HYSTA Talk. My name is Tianyu. I am a project manager at HYSTA, and I will be the host and your moderator for today's event. And before we formally start, I want to remind you that first, apology due to the limited capacity of the Zoom webinar. We cannot host all of you like in the Zoom webinar. However, one of my colleagues have already sent out an email to your email address, which you used to register for this event. So if you or your friends happen like they cannot join the Zoom webinar, like don't worry, go to the email box and you will find the link, which will lead you to the YouTube live stream of this event. Okay, so for today, our theme is growth without boundaries, and it is an event that featured on women leadership and career development. So despite this increasing number of women in labor participation, women are still very much underrepresented in leadership roles and especially the senior leadership roles. And we've also felt this urge to hold this panel at this particular time point, as multiple research have pointed out that the pandemic have actually increased the challenges that women have already facing. So women are more and more like being pushed out of the workplace. So how might we understand this gender disparity in the workplace, especially when we are emphasizing diversity and leadership? And how might women grow without boundaries and overcome the challenges in both life and career? So today we are really honored to have these three wonderful women leaders with their top-notch tech and finance backgrounds to be here and to share with us their stories, experiences, and their advice. So here is a quick view of the agenda of today's event. So after this, I will give a brief introduction of HYSTA, and then we will start the panel discussion. Then at around like 8 or 8:05, we will start the Q&A session. So you could use the Q&A box or the chat function, and then type out your question, and I will call your question, and if you are okay, you can raise up your hand, and one of our colleagues will unmute you and let you directly speak your questions to our panelists. Okay, so first about HYSTA. HYSTA was founded in 1999, and it is one of the leading nonprofit professional organizations that empowers Chinese American entrepreneurs and leaders. And at HYSTA, we had these two types of events, HYSTA Talk and annual conference. And today we are at HYSTA Talk, where we invite inspiring entrepreneurs and leaders like the three women we have today to share their stories and ideas, encourage good values, connect, inspire, and empower the next generation of leaders. And also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Deloitte and K&L Gates. Okay, so today we are really honored to have Deborah Liu, Lili, and Lili Zheng to be our panelists. And each of them have this very amazing background. And I believe many of you have already learned about them or even heard their talks in person or from other online venues. But let me do this introduction first. So Deborah Liu, who is the CEO of Ancestry, a global leader in family history and consumer genomics. Prior to Ancestry, she has over 18 years of experience leading teams of product managers and engineers at Facebook, PayPal, and eBay. She was a senior executive at Facebook and created and led Facebook's marketplace, where millions of people buy and sell from one another. She also led the development of Facebook's first mobile ad product for apps and its mobile ad network, in addition to building the company's game business and its payment platforms, so including Facebook Pay. Besides her role at Ancestry, she also currently serves on the board of Intuit, and she's a seed investor and advisor to several startups. She also holds several payments and commerce-related patents. Deb was named by Payment Source as one of the most influential women in payments and one of business leaders' most powerful female engineers. She has been actively involved with promoting diversity and women in tech. She is the founder of Women in Products, a nonprofit to connect and support women in product management field. So welcome, Deb. Yeah. And second, we have Lick. So Lick Dai is an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, and an educator. She was one of the first 20 employees of Apple China and later became employee 84 at Alibaba. And she was a head of product there. Now she is a partner at LDV Partners, which is a Silicon Valley venture capital firm, leading investments in AI, big data, and computing. She is also an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon University, teaches applied AI at CMU Integrated Innovation Institute, College of Engineering. She has been actively involved in empowering women and in business and technology. She is on the advisory board of Women in Technology International, which is a global nonprofit organization empowering women in business and technology. She is the first ever chairwoman of HYSTA and is also co-founder of ShinTech, a nonprofit accelerator for SaaS startups. And last but definitely not the least, we have Lili Zheng. So Lili is a senior US partner at Deloitte, the world's largest professional services firm. She has substantial experience in cross-border tax planning, helping numerous clients in the technology, media, and telecommunications, and life science and healthcare industry with their cross-border investment structure, IPO planning, and merge and acquisition, entry and exit strategies. She is also the deputy managing partner of the US Chinese Services Group, managing the firm's cross-functional services between the US and China. She is an advocate for women in leadership and has donated her time to various nonprofit organizations, including serving on the board of HYSTA. Lili is a frequent speaker at top financial forums and was voted numerous times by international tax reviews as one of the top US tax advisors. For her engagement in promoting women leadership, she was awarded a WIB Leadership Award by Asian Women in Business in 2004 and received the Women of Influence Award from the Silicon Valley Business Journal in 2010. Since 2012, Lili was named annually as one of the leading women in business law by the Euromoney Legal Media Group. Okay, so as we can see, the three speakers today actually have like a lot, actually are come from like very different backgrounds and worked in these different industries. However, we can also see that there will be a lot of commonalities when we delve into their career paths. So besides like being a world-class women leaders who are like legendary role models for many people, they've all of them have also devoted a lot into promoting diversity and inclusion. So I believe it will be such an excitement to hear and learn from their stories today. So Deb, Lake, and Lili, before I throw out all these panel question to you, could you please like give a short introduction about your company? What do you do at the company? And in particular, what kind of like diversity and inclusion strategies your company or the organizations that you've been affiliated with have been promoting and adopted? Yeah.
So maybe Deb go first.
Okay, I'll start. I am as she had said, I am the new CEO of Ancestry. I actually joined the company 3 months ago. I hit day 90, I think tomorrow.
Wow.
So it will be quite an adventure. I spent 11 years at Facebook leading a number of diversity initiatives there, as well as Facebook Marketplace, payments, and some other initiatives. You know, Ancestry is a new company to me, but we help people connect with their family story. So, your ancestors connect through DNA to actually tell your family story and really kind of connect through your what it is that you want to share with your future generations. And so the company, as a result, is very committed to inclusion and diversity. In 2019, we actually formed the Intercultural Competence Committee to actually ensure that products are more inclusive. As the world changes, it's really important that our decisions and representation of diversity also changes. The models of families have evolved over the years as well, and we need to make sure that we're supporting that. We also are really helping to have more inclusive teams, such as training for empathy and allyship. And we're partnering with companies like Catalyst, a global nonprofit fostering inclusive work environments. And so it is something that we need to do because, as you know, many studies have proven that diverse teams actually have better outcomes. And so we are building a product for different cultures, different experiences, and we want to make sure that those voices are heard and represented. And that's why it's so important to us that diversity inclusion is part of what we do.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. That's great. And Lake, do you want to come next?
Yeah, so first of all, I realized all three of us have very long bio, so I'm not going to add more to it. But there are two things I want to mention. One is that as the chairman of HYSTA, and HYSTA, many of you already know, and over the years, and thank you very much for your support. What we're trying to do going forward is that we do want to introduce more diversity, not only just in the operating team, but also we really want to promote more great, amazing founders, like female founders, as Tianyu mentioned. So our main purpose is to empower Chinese American entrepreneurs. In that community, we think we've seen so many amazing female founders out there, and we want to give the stage to more of them. Right. So as you probably already know, that starting from this year, that we have more than 50% of speakers are female. So we want to continue to do this. That's number one. And the other thing I have been doing, and this is actually I want to mention Deb as well. So I'm a VC, and I know in the VC world, there are less in the US, actually less than 4.9% of VCs are female. And among them, I would say in the overall VC population, less than 2.4% of them are actually founding partners, right? So what we have been doing is that, over the years, that not only just vouch for there are more female representatives in the VC community, in the founder community, but also we would like to see more women on board. So that's the initiative that I've been pushing in the Women in Technology International, but also on the other hand, Deb, I know Deb has been putting together a list, and we're vouching for other female successful board candidates to the companies seeking for positions. So not only just referring them, but also, for example, I am a VC and I have opportunities to recommend good candidates to our portfolio companies, and I can continue to do that. And I hope to see more and more successful women representations on the board, both on private company and the public companies going forward.
Like that's pretty amazing. Well, I want to say a couple of things. One is I want to congratulate you again. You were the second chairwoman at HYSTA. And after a number of years, it's about time. So we're so happy to see you at the helm. And then the other thing is I actually wanted, before I talk about Deloitte, which everyone knows, I wanted to congratulate and welcome the men, our male participants in today's event. I saw quite a number of them. I'm very impressed. I think it's a diversity thing, and it's about women, it's about men, and we all do carry our roles. And I think for them to show up to support this event, I think they're very smart, because not only they're supporting it, they're also showing their strengths and their confidence, and they want to learn more. So I really want to appreciate and point that out. As far as Deloitte, as you might know, Deloitte is the world's largest professional services firm. We have about 350,000 people. And every time I check the number, I would be wrong because it grows quite rapidly globally, and over 150 jurisdictions that we practice in. And then in the US alone, we have about 65,000 people. And when it comes to diversity, we are in the business of people, right? Because we are, without people, we can't do anything. We're in professional services. So that diversity and inclusion strategy is exceedingly important. In India, just to cover US, we have 35,000 people just covering for the US market as dedicated there in India. So the cultural diversity is really important to us. So just earlier this year, we published a transparency report, which is not being asked by some kind of regulator and others. We just want to be transparent and take it out to the marketplace because we want to show that we are an inclusive culture, and we empower our people so that they can connect with our values, and they would feel like they belong in this practice, and their teams, their offices, so they can support and grow with the firm in large. And so during the survey, what we see is in overall and level, when people come in, you can see female, male, about 50-50. And in Asians, it's very well represented in the Asian population. But as we progress, we see the stats change. So we will have less females retained in the workforce than male, and less women when it gets to partners, and less when it goes to leadership. On the other hand, on our board is fairly represented by female. Our chairwoman is female. Our global chairwoman, our global chair is also a woman. We are very well represented on the board. So there is a little bit of disconnect between the entry levels to the part that you pass through a senior manager to a partner. So that is an area that we are making progress, but not enough. And we're dedicated and committed to really move the needle to have more diversity and more women retention in our workforce. As we all know, women are very talented. It's just how could we encourage everyone to be able to connect and belong and grow? So that is really our strategy. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to our host.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Deb, Lake, and Lili, for sharing and giving this such a very encouraging and positive tone of this opening introduction for our panel. And I always believe, and first, I really appreciate all of you have devoted so much to promote diversity, equality, and gender at your workplace and organizations. And also, I feel like for this type of panels, it is really like encouraging and inspiring for women and also like men to hear about the stories from like you like world-class leaders and like sharing your past experience and sharing the challenges and the boundaries that you've hit in the past, because most of them may well be like undergoing such like challenges at the current moment. So now let's delve into more details about your career stories and the important turning points and decisions that you've made in your career development. So first, I'll shift back to that. So you just mentioned that this is the 90th day of your CEO position at Ancestry. First, congratulations. And I'm really excited about it too. And I know that prior to that, you were this successful, incredible, like senior executive leader at Facebook. And also you held this senior leadership roles at PayPal and eBay. So I think the very first sub question that I have is what have like attracted you to Ancestry and what made you want to start this new journey? And relating to that, I want to also like understand a bit more is when I look at your like career path, and I see that you are always like, you know, crossing boundaries and moving from one industry to another industry. Like you first shift from consulting to tech to payments, and from like eBay, PayPal to Facebook, and now from Facebook to Ancestry. So I'm wondering, like, when you now like look back, could you talk a bit more about some of the important steps and how did you make some of the important decisions? And also, like for this time from Facebook to Ancestry, how different or similar you would think this turning point is, like when compared to the previous ones? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, what attracted me to this role? So what happened was last summer, you know, we were kind of 3 or 4 months into the lockdown and I wasn't commuting anymore. I used to travel quite a bit and I wasn't traveling as much anymore either. And there was no work events. And so I decided I would optimize for kind of learning and kind of figuring out kind of what makes me happy? What is going to drive me forward from here? I had been at the company at that point, probably about, I think more than 10, I reached kind of the 11th year. And, you know, I was getting a little restless and I actually wrote about this a couple weeks ago. So I actually have a newsletter, Substack. It's Deb Liu at Substack if you want to read it. But basically I talked about how I just started getting restless. So I just started talking to people. I called up all of these old friends that I had worked with, people who had changed careers. I explored kind of, you know, do I want to continue? But if I continued, I knew I'd have to recommit 2 or 3 more years to the next product. And I was kind of finishing off, Marketplace was just announced to hit 1 billion people. And I kind of told myself once I got there that I would try to figure out, like, do I want to do another product? Do I want to stay? Do I want to go? And we reached that point. And we were kind of on that path already. And so as I talked to people, I realized that I just wanted to solve for something else. Like I was doing more than I was learning. I was getting really, really good at working at Facebook. And I realized that that's not a skill that's that transferable in life. And it was a very useful skill, I have to say. But I think often you kind of become so good at working at a company that you forget that your learning curve has now kind of plateaued. And I was starting to feel that restlessness. And so after talking to everybody, I realized I just wanted to optimize for something else, which is what is my next step? And I explored a number of different things. I talked to a number of different advisors, and I realized this opportunity actually happened to come along right around that time, September, October. And I started talking to them. I wasn't 100% sure what I was going to do with it. It was kind of a long interview process. I got the offer, I think, the day before New Year's Eve. And so it was like a 2 or 3 month process. And and I debated kind of whether to stay or go, and I ended up taking this job, and it's been an incredible journey.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, this shelter in place time period really offers you, the space and time to think about what's the inspiration of your life and what are the things really drives you forward. And also, I'm wondering, to dive a bit deeper, as you moved from different industries, and also Facebook and Ancestry, you have different positions, and the company's domain focus and also the company style could be different. And also you are starting remotely, right? So I'm wondering what kind of challenges that you encountered, you can talk about it from your previous experience, or in this at this current stage. And in particular, how did you cultivate ties, connections with your ancestry fellows, in this sheltering in place and remote working mode? Yeah.
Well, as I was interviewing, I hadn't met anybody in person. I interviewed through the whole process, 100% through Zoom. And then I accepted the job having never met anyone in person either. In fact, how the senior team met me was they were put on a call and not told who I was. And then it turned on and they saw my name. And the first thing I said to them is, feel free to Google me. Because, but at the same time, it was under, obviously it was fairly, it was hard because you didn't want to accidentally pre-announce that I was considering this role. And so, it was a very interesting experience. But building connection is harder over Zoom because you can't have dinner or drinks, so you can't, it's hard to just casually talk, right? And I think that it then requires a lot more effort to build connection, to build that quality of having the informal conversations. And so there's always this distance of staring into a camera in a room by yourself. It's very different than kind of what we are used to in connection.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you just hit a very important point about also being a leader at the company is about being this authentic and personal feelings. And I think we can definitely talk more about that in our later questions. And now also in regard to this question about important steps and important decisions, I want to now move away from that a bit and let you rest, and now shifted focus to Lake. So Lake, actually, when I look at your career stories, I find a lot of commonalities between you and Deb, and maybe even a bit more mobility and shifting from your stories. Since I know you've that you two have all worked in these big names, and you are you are the early employees at Apple China, and then number 84 employees at Alibaba, and then you left Alibaba for Yahoo. And I mean, amazingly, in 2003, you came to US to help Overture to develop the global business. And then after that, you become the startup entrepreneur, build startups, and then do the incubators, accelerators, and venture capitalists, and adjunct professors. I mean, I cannot list all of them. It's really long list of things that you have done. And what attracts me mostly is, the first question is, have you ever encountered any challenges while you are crossing so many boundaries, right? And the other question is, in our previous conversations, you mentioned that you were actually an econ major at your university. And so, but then when you started work, you are into this super tech, and you got this patents, and then you are now a professor teaching applied AI. So I'm wondering, also, could you talk a bit more about, the challenges and how do you manage to overcome them while you are crossing these different boundaries?
Yeah. Well, for your first question, the answer is absolutely yes, all the time.
Yeah.
So this is a very long question, right? So
Yes.
before we talk about boundaries, I think the first thing is that why I was making those changes, right? So I think in my life or in my career, there was always very clear about what I want. And if I have to categorize them, there are actually 3 criteria. The first thing is that I have to do something that is intellectually very interesting, right? So like Deb said, that there's something that you can learn from it and they keep things very interesting. So regardless, moving from Apple to a completely new industry, which is the internet, and there was very early few years of the internet industry, or from there, from Asia moved to the US, or from large company Yahoo moved to the startup environment, or even now, right, investing and teaching. There are also an element of learning element into it. So being a VC, I think, is fantastic because I feel like we're really blessed that we got paid to be taught by those brilliant founders what they have learned in their industry and what was the problem they're trying to solve, and teach me the newest technologies, the newest market. So that's a blessing. Teaching is also mutual, right? So most people think a professor teaching students. We're also learning from our students. And I'm learning from our guest speakers all the time. So that's why every year I bring different guest speakers to apply AI. So far, we already have head of AI of all the major tech companies, head of AWS, Google Cloud, and other than Apple, because Apple doesn't want to talk about it. But a lot of major companies, Square, LinkedIn, as you can think of, and so I'm learning from that as well. So that's the first element, learning element. The second element is become more and more important as I grow older, is that I have to do something that is meaningful, that has to be some sort of positive impact, right? So you just have such, life is not that long. And we should do something more than just, creating a good environment for yourself. There is something that you should give back to the society that who have helped to, grow you and raise you and help the people who didn't have the opportunity to have it. So the positive impact, so for example, the first time I realized it is so important is that I got an opportunity to work for Alibaba. As a very small startup, but the mission was very clear, is to help the small, medium business to do business, to be profitable without the middleman. And I did not realize how important it is when you're doing something that impactful, how rewarding it is, because your customer come back, tell you, we've been running this business for generations, and we couldn't thank you enough for how you help us to survive. So that's something I didn't anticipate, is going beyond just monetary or the psychological sense of a success of a career. So as I do more and more, for example, being an educator, and each year I would say that's the most rewarding job I have, is to see students how they grow, and how I feel like we contribute so little, because our experience and knowledge for us to give is unlimited. You can repeat use the knowledge to give to everybody, right? But this, for the students, it could be a huge thing. You may help them skip a few years of the errors they could make, and just it's just something that I think is really impactful. The last thing, in addition to learning and impact, the last thing is you got to do this with the people you like, right? So think about 24/7, 24 hours a day, minus sleeping. You're going to be working majority of the time. You want to work with the people that you really like and enjoy working with, right? So that's if you look at the 3 criteria, there's nothing tells you should be a product manager, you should be an engineer, or you should be VC or teacher, right? So as long as I meet that 3 criteria, I feel like I can do a lot of things. Going back to your question, boundary. Obviously there is a boundary out there, right? So when I first start teaching and people will ask, do you have a PhD? I said, I don't have it yet, right? Okay, I'll get it someday.
Yeah, you will.
But well, yes, currently I'm actually a computer science student, MS and PhD student at Stanford. But all those things, I think that don't let the belief and say, because what you were, right? For example, undergrad is econ, doesn't mean that I cannot get into Stanford computer science department, right? Nobody tells me that. And then people always think that you take a PhD to teach or become a really good professor. So right now I'm one of the top rated professors at CMU, Silicon Valley. The reason is that if you're very, very familiar with the subject that you're teaching, which applied AI, I know I invest in AI, right? And then search engine advertising product, which I used to build, were the first group of products that using machine learning, intent mining, right? So if you're very, very familiar with the subject, you have something to bring to your student. You can bring other industry experts to help them to understand, and you create value, then you are a good teacher. I think that's important. Don't let people to say, this and that. That's number one. Number two is that nothing is still, right? So today I'm not PhD doesn't mean 4 years later I won't be a PhD. And why is that relevant to my teaching? Actually, I can make a strong argument. It may not be the case, right? In some of the field. So what was your second question? Sorry.
Oh, my second question is more about how do you about these boundaries, what are they, that how do you, overcome them and rise to leadership? Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think I'm sort of answering it. So I'll leave more time to Lili. Huh?
Okay, thank you so much, Lake. And I think, wow, you're really a very good professor. I can really tell from this conversation here. I've learned so much. So for Lili, hi Lili. So you are the first mainland Chinese female partner at Deloitte US firm. And I know for many women in the accounting profession, finance industry, you're really a role model because, from the registration form, someone is really, mentioning your name and asking questions about you sharing your stories. As an Asian woman, what are the challenges you have seen in Korea, how they have shaped you? And also maybe more in general, can you speak about your journey into leadership into Deloitte, at Deloitte? Yeah.
All right. Well, now this is an interesting thing. I didn't really know that's what I wanted to do when I started. Like many, I immigrated from China to the US, and I thought I was better in math and I was going to be a math major. And I never thought that I was going to be an accountant. But for my grandfather, who said, you will apply to be a CPA, you study accounting, and you will go to UC Berkeley. And I didn't even know that there was more than one school. I just applied to university to UC Berkeley and thinking that if I apply, I will be accepted. Well, that was being naive and not knowing the culture. But after I started, I think a lot of it has to do, how do you then, I think to Lake Dai's point, what do you want? Unlike Lake Dai, I have no clear direction as to what I want and what I like, because immigrating from China, when I left China, I can honestly speak a few words in English. I can say long live Chen and Mao and never forget class struggle. And those are the words that I knew, right? So coming to this country and studying accounting in finance, you're required to have good English skills. So you must master that. And so that was a tough thing. But I started and I was able to get accepted as one of the big 8 firms at that time. But I think where I grow in terms of how I moved on within Deloitte is going back to the learning and curiosity and about the willingness to take a risk and evaluate things differently. So I started in San Francisco doing a lot of banks, a lot of financial institutions, and working with consumer products, and working at the time, a lot of Japanese companies investing in the US. They're buying up Pebble Beach, they're buying all the real estate, right? So I was working with the inbound investment from Japan. I realized with my background being Asian, I can understand the culture a little bit more. I can communicate better. And so I can make, everything more smooth and running smoothly. Then I realized I was in a unit within Deloitte in San Francisco that I was doing mostly compliance, and I wanted to do consulting. And I also wanted to have more international experience. But like any organization, if you're doing a good job, and they would appreciate you to continue to do that good job, and they don't really want you to move, right? Because that is the higher return for the investment. So if you just done well and you want to move on, then you have to start over again. But I did ask for the opportunity, and I have a mentor that will allow me to do that. So basically, I moved on to, I went to Japan, and there I was able to prove a few things. One is to prove that no one is that important. Anyone is replaceable, right? So when you leave, there are other people who can grow into that role. And it's not just because you're good, and when you leave, you allow other people to move up. And while in Tokyo, I've learned, certainly have to learn some Japanese, and I've learned a lot more about international business. So when I come back to San Francisco, I realized all those things that I was doing were really interesting, and having more knowledge from Japan was very helpful. But then we see a big boom in technology. So now I thought it was good to follow the opportunities. So I see Silicon Valley was booming, and our office there is smaller. And so when leadership came to me and said, would you be willing to move to Silicon Valley? And I said, sure. And the reason I would do that is most people would say you're leaving your comfort zone. You just moved to this new unit, and now you're moving to Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley was very small then for us. But I took the opportunity, and there, instead of doing banks and real estate and financial institutions, investment funds, consumer products, I was there learning more about software, fabless semiconductors, a lot of technology companies. So like Lake, I was learning about the business, about the startups, about all the different industries, and it was so much fun. And so, and I had an opportunity to help many companies go public, and during that whole process, you learn a lot, right? So as that was going, I got an opportunity to move to Beijing as the Chinese MOFCOM was requesting some assistance from the big accounting firms to help them write some 30 accounting standards for Ministry of Finance. So I was the very few people in the US firm that speaks Mandarin or bilingual that can do this. So I went with another colleague of mine to Beijing and started doing writing accounting standards, and then come back, of course, to Silicon Valley. Fast forward, I was also given the opportunity to move to Hong Kong when I make partner. Shortly after I make partner, I was given the opportunity to go to Hong Kong and lead a team of partners from 14 different countries to create a center of excellence. And it's a separate member firm. So I have my board. So I had a little bit of doubt, because you're right at your comfort zone. You're doing quite well in Silicon Valley. You just become partner. Now, why do you drop everything that you've worked so hard for and go to a new country, new market, and doing a new job? And that was a little bit crazy. But the leadership says we couldn't find anyone that are, that can speak Mandarin and Cantonese and English and can do this. So the job was made for you. So I had an opportunity to take it. So I decided to take a risk and went for it. So I think by taking these risks and taking different assignments allow me to see a lot more globally as what's happening in the marketplace. Even though I'm Chinese, I must say that when I got to Hong Kong, I realized how bad my Chinese was, right? Because you're not there, then things gets invented, all these words and everything is invented, and you have to catch up. And then when I came back to the US, now I'm in New York, I was given the opportunity to come back to Silicon Valley or to New York. Again, I chose New York simply because I know nothing about New York. Upon return, I realized New York may as well be a separate country. It's a very different country than the West Coast or Hong Kong. It's actually harder to reintegrate into New York than it is Hong Kong. But after a couple of years, I must say I really enjoyed the culture here, the art, the history, and just the diversity in a huge amount of immigrants, and the diversity is very, very different. So given the opportunity, I think me moving on in different parts of Deloitte, unlike both Deb and Lake, I had one job. I worked for one firm for almost, 30 plus years. And I never changed the firm. However, I did change my job multiple times. I went from San Francisco to Japan to Silicon Valley, and then to Beijing, and come back to Silicon Valley, and then went to Hong Kong, and then come back to New York. So every place I go, the job is slightly different, and the roles are different, and the markets are different. So you have an opportunity to learn and to feast your curiosity. So, but I do come back to Silicon Valley to visit with Lake and everybody else. And so it's a whole learning experience. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's super wonderful. Like, do you have anything you want to say as you unmute yourself?
I think it's really amazing. I've known Lili for some time, but never heard the entire story. It takes a lot of gut to move from one place to another place and just start all over again. So
yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Lili, although you mentioned that you just stayed at Deloitte, but I mean, you moved in between so many locales, shuttle between these Asian Pacific regions, and you are crossing different cultural backgrounds, which I feel is really, really amazing. Okay, so now let's move to the second set of questions, because I noticed our time is ticking. And the second questions is really also very hit on by our attendees, which is about this idea, which I think I got inspired from Deb, one of your previous workshops on this Find Your Voice. So in that workshop, you mentioned that to move up in your career path, it is really important to find your voice, which is a personal branding. So I'm wondering, could any of you start sharing a bit about your insight about what kind of voice, or in other words, what kind of qualities should a women leader have, and how to find it?
Well, I think that for me, as I give this talk called Finding Your Voice, and I've written an article about it in Quartz as well, which is, I think that, when you're an Asian woman in particular, you're taught to, you're part of a collective society, right? My parents are I was very shy. My parents are just put your head down, do the hard work, and you'll be recognized, right? And American model of leadership looks nothing like that. What we've been taught our whole lives to be, demure, or to defer, to be collective, to put our head down, is literally the opposite of what it takes to be successful in American society, and the way that the corporate world works here. And I think that dichotomy and that cognitive dissonance is very, very hard for many people who grew up with what we say Asian values, right? And as women, doubly so, we are taught to be the caretaker and nurturer, and then so many different ways, stereotypes of what we were expected to be is in stark contrast with who it takes to be seen as a leader, what it takes to be seen as a leader here in America. And so for me, finding your voice is really about, how do you navigate through that? How can you actually be authentic in how you share or speak up without it feeling inauthentic? And how do you actually share your point of view without it feeling off? And so it's really a skill like any other. And I tell people, look, you get a choice every time, every conversation, every moment. you interact with someone, you get to choose. You don't get to choose what they think, but you can talk and speak with what feeling do you want them to have as they walk away? And the question is it the next time, do I want Lake there at the next meeting because she was so insightful and she helped accelerate us? Or, did Lili not say anything? And therefore, maybe I should invite her because, she didn't really seem that engaged. You get a choice of what you leave behind. And I hope that each time, instead of doing what we feel most comfortable with, we actually push ourselves out of our comfort zone and say, hey, what would somebody who is a leader do? What kind of impression do I want to leave? Not just what makes me feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, Lake, please.
Okay. I think, first of all, Deb, well said. I think that's exactly what we should, really good advice. I just want to patch two personal stories. The first story, this is all about women on board. So board governing maybe, sounds a little bit foreign, but just imagine that typically any kind of company's board currently are all white male. That's the majority of the board, right? So I'm actually currently on 4 boards and then used to be on 5. I would say of all the boards that I've been on, majority of them I'm the only female on the board. The first time I walked into a board meeting, and it was quite interesting because I got graded by the rest of the board member, and they said, "Are you the new lawyer taking notes for this board meeting?" I said, "No, sorry, right? I am the new board member, and my name does not really represent a very clear gender signal. So they were expecting a male like that show up as the new representative, but that's actually not the first time I had that experience. The second story I want to share is so how do I deal with this, right? But instead of answer directly, I want to share another story that I heard. I thought was very, very good. So many of you probably have heard that in California, if you're a public company, you should have at least 1 female board member, right? This is a new thing. 3 years ago, we didn't even have this policy. So the person who pushed for this new policy to pass in California is the California State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson. So Senator Jackson was the one pushed for this to pass. And she gave a very interesting talk at Women in Tech International Conference about 2 years ago. And she said, why am I doing this, right? So she said, well, if you're a home board member, you probably have the experience that if you're the only woman there and someone was going to ask you to get coffee. I actually being asked in the past to ask to get the coffee. And she said, if you're the only person, you'll be asked to get coffee. And you have 2 women in the board, then maybe you 2 will talk about who's going to get coffee. And you have 3 women, on the board meeting. You can tell the guys, go get your own damn coffee, right? So that was the story she shared, and it was very funny. But the spirit of the story is that we should, as the representative there in the board meeting or any kind of, executive team or, management team, we all carry the responsibility to invite other brilliant, amazing, successful women to join it, to bring the diversity to the team. That was my 2 stories. Yeah.
Really fascinating stories. So interesting to learn that. Yeah. And Lili, do you have anything that you want to add?
Sure. In terms of having your voice being heard, and I would echo everything that Deb and Lake and mentioned. I think that's pretty amazing. Similar experiences, right? But I would just add a couple points. One is the cultural elements, right? Yes, you want your voice to be heard, but there's so many stereotypes. When we speak, and people will think you're too aggressive, right? when males speak, then you're not, right? So it's the stereotype. And then there's the cultural aspect. So when I moved to Hong Kong, I was in the Silicon Valley style, blue jeans and a white shirt. And I showed up very early in the office. And of course, my secretary, I set up the brand new team, including from secretary to tea lady. Everybody's new. Nobody knew who anybody is, right? So I showed up early and my secretary is already there. And I went to her office because it had my name on it. And she says, my boss is not here yet. So we don't know what she wants. We don't know what my boss wants. Because she didn't know that that it's not a man coming to lead the group. So she just assumed that I was the tea lady. So even some of the stereotype is not projected from a man to a woman, but it's more the whole society and the whole cultural, right, aspect of it. And women in these roles and supporting roles would have that impression. So how do we change that? So you have to adapt. And then the other point I would make is also we need to have agility, but also cultural sensitivity and empathy. We need to understand how it all works. While we can have our voice, how you deliver your voice and to make it effective requires that you have some understanding of the cultural aspect. If you go to Japan, you better know when to say and what to say. And if you're in China, you also have a different way of acting. Actually, I would say that in China, the female are more dominant and more assertive than any region that I've seen, and they're very effective. And in Hong Kong, you have a blend of British, Canadian, Indian, Americans, big melting pot. So everything is very different. So while I was there, I did help formed a new chapter for women in leadership, which is a nonprofit. And at the time, we see a lot of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley and a lot of entrepreneurs in China, but Hong Kong wasn't that many. And so it was rather quiet. So at a request of a few other people, we thought we should have a chapter for women in leadership, which is founded by a couple of VCs from Silicon Valley. And they started in Shanghai. And I think they put in the initial seed money. So I started that from the Zhusanjiang, Greater Bay Area, Pearl River Delta. And where we would see is for women to hear, to have their voice heard, they have to deliver differently. They can deliver in different stages, whether or not in the form of art, in the form of fashion, in the form of technology, startups. So we just use different ways of illustrating and speaking up. So unless you speak, you will never be heard. So there's no shame of speaking. And I think it's just have a little bit of cultural dimension to it. We can always be very efficient in deliver our messages, just with a little bit of practicing. So I just want to add to those quick points to end that.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. And this cultural sensitivity elements, I believe that, we should definitely adjust and know the context that we sit in, and know the norms and the practices that we could adopt and endorse to promote ourselves. I mean, hearing all of you answering these questions, I feel like I'm growing really, really greedy. I really want to, delve into more in depth about each of your stories. But then I also realized that, time flies. So, but before we move on to this Q&A session, I also want to bring out this question, which I believe many our attendees will probably also ask if I didn't ask that. So this is a question about work-life balance. So I know I saw from our registration form, many of our attendees are women, and they are women from in their late 20s, late 30s, and also 40s. And many of them are entering marriage and even the motherhood. So, and also, in the US and also worldwide, we have this phenomenon called Motherhood Penalty. So where is like a woman, when they give birth, when they're pregnant, they actually receive like less compensations and less benefits and less opportunity to get promoted in the career. So as a representative from all the attendees, I'm wondering like if any of you could share a bit about this, how you balance these competing devotions to family and work, and how do you, if there's any advice you would like to give to our attendees about handling this motherhood penalty, like in their work. Yeah.
Well, I think that if people realize, first of all, it's something like 70% of mothers of children with under 18 actually work, either full-time or mostly full-time. So I think that, you know, there's no, even though there is a massive motherhood penalty, I think it's one of those things where if everyone just shared more about what it was actually like, there's not this secret, right? I mean, a vast majority of women have children at home and are working. And so I think that we need to kind of face what that is. But the motherhood penalty, so for those of you who don't know, it's not only do you not get the offer. So if it shows that on your resume that you're a mother, you're much less likely to get an offer. Even if you get an offer, you're actually offered like $10,000 or $20,000 less. Right. So it's a pretty massive, and you're given fewer opportunities. I have 3 kids. They're running around outside. You can probably hear the footsteps. And, you know, I knew that going in. And, you know, I really worried about how I would be perceived, except that I worked at Facebook, and, you know, you post your family photos on Facebook. And then it used to be, we didn't have something called Workplace. So you would actually friend everybody after the meeting. So everyone could see all of your photos, what you're doing every weekend. And mine was mostly changing diapers. And so, but you kind of had to decide. And I worked at a company where the average age at the time was in their 20s, and I was well into my 30s. And so I kind of had to decide, how much of this do I lean into and how much do I just try to hide? I decided I don't want to hide my kids. I don't, you know, people should judge me on my merits. And I started posting, you know, I had always been posting about my kids, but now I had to friend everybody. And I decided I was going to be unapologetic about it. I eventually created a comic strip called Mommy School, if you want to go to mommyschool.net, with some of the adventures of my kids. And I'm pretty open about, you know, who I am, because I feel like if we hide that part of ourselves, it's like half of our lives. Half of our lives are at work and half of your lives are at home. And if you have to hide each from each other, it makes it very difficult for you to balance.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Deb, you're really like hitting on this point about being the authentic self, and yeah, really reveal the true self to your colleagues and people that you're working with at workplace. Yeah. Nick, I see you unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I'm actually quite excited to talk about this because
wow,
it's
great.
Not easy. It's not easy. I can't remember how many times I asked for other people's advice and how do you keep your work-life balance, right? So the answers are all different, but many of them actually conclude it's really difficult. Nobody's saying that, you know, it's an easy job. Marriage is hard, and being a parent is even harder. I think number one, for me, I think number one is that having your partner understand what's important to you, and you guys talk about this and have a very understanding and supportive spouse is very, very important. So that's number one. And number two, I think that there's outside perspective, there's the inside perspective. Many of my friends, including myself, the time when we're a new mom, there's a little bit like mommy's guilt, right? Particularly, you know, when my son went to school, and then other moms and volunteered, do different things, and of course, Deb with Facebook, and you can see all the moms and doing the awesome stuff, and then where were you, right? And sometimes there's peer pressure, right? Peer pressure is like the unspoken look of you're not a good mom. Or where were you when other moms were there? I think that's really, really hard. And as a new parent at the time, I thought, you know, I can manage everything at work, almost, right? But this is something really new. Nobody was born as a trained parent. And this is a job you cannot quit. You cannot quit. And you almost feel like you cannot fail either. So it's very, very difficult. So I put a lot of, I think, expectation on myself until one day, one of my close friends saw me kind of struggling, right? And he asked me, he said, okay, so why are you frustrated? I said, I feel like I'm not a good mom. I should be there when he had this thing or that event, or I should be, going to the field trip with other parents, but I have so much work right now, or I'm traveling, right? And he just asked me, so, well, at the end of the day, nobody's opinion matters, right? It doesn't matter what parents think. It doesn't matter what the teacher think. It doesn't matter that, even your spouse think. Does your son think you're a really good mom? And I said, yeah, I think so. We have a good relationship. And he said, that's it, right? It's not about amount the time that you spend together. It's not about, social media posting how happy you are. It's about what your kid are, going to marriage, the same thing. Does your spouse think you're a really good partner? That's everything matters, right? So I think that it was life-changing advice that I have received. And then once I give myself that okay, right? And everything is so much easier to dealing with the outside perspective. I think it's to make peace with yourself and realize that, I'm a good parent and I'm learning, and nobody's perfect. Everyone's learning, right? And I'm gonna continue to learn as, my kid continue to grow, and I'm learning how to deal with teenager. And then at some point, go to college, and maybe, he get married, and I have to learn how to be a good in-law, right? So all the things they continue to learn. So don't give yourself a hard time. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that's all so true. I'm just going to add just a couple of different angles. One is, I think you're both right in terms of what you can do, right? But there is also the external factor. What can the company you work for do, right? So at Deloitte, when I was right before I make partner, I was really worried. I didn't want to get pregnant. I didn't want to have a kid before I make partner. Because that would mean that maybe I get delayed, maybe I would never make it, right? So timing is everything. Of course, right before I make partner, I was pregnant, and I'm going to deliver the baby. And there's a big M&A deals happening with, U.S. and a French company and life science. So a bunch of doctors, and I worked till the day of the expected delivery date. And then I went to the hospital, and then it was all done. I came back, and the next day just continued to work the deal, because the people on the deal says, we really need you. And by the way, they're all doctors. They really know what it means for women to have just delivered a child and then just come back to the deal and do this. But I did that for the first one. A couple of things I learned. One is I didn't have to do that. I was too hard on myself, like Blake. I was too worried, right? Our company is actually pretty good. Now we have parental leave. It's both spouse can take leaves, not just the mother. So the husband can help. And actually, we find a lot of households, it's really a family unit, right? You're a cast of support. You play different roles. Sometimes the mother is playing a career role, and sometimes it's mother roles, and the father could step in and help. And so we've seen a lot of career women, they were able to get help from their partner and their husband and their parents and the family, and there's a whole cast of supporting cast that's there to help. So, but the company policy really plays an important role. So of course, when I had my second, I took the entire 3 months off before and after, and I really enjoyed myself. And so I did it at two extremes, and I really learned that both are fine, because the first one, because you don't have to worry about being pregnant and you work to the end, and the next one you really enjoy life. So I think there are just different ways of dealing with it. And I know a lot of companies are giving really good policies for the parents and parenting and husband and wife. And so I think that is a big help. And there are a lot of good policies for people. And then the other thing I would just go back to, when people ask me, how do you deal with work-life balance? The giving child motherhood penalty, I think that's changing quite a bit. I think if you look at the best companies to work for and their policies, and the policies are really supportive for women to have a career. So if you look at just Deloitte, we have 50% women at the junior stage. And how do they move up? We need them. They're all brilliant. We hire them and we train them. We don't want to lose them just because they had a baby. So we want them to come back. So there are a lot of things that the company should be doing if they really care about their people and the development, right? So these are the assets you invested in there. So you want to have the return. So after the motherhood, after they deliver the baby and have some rest, and they will come back to the workforce. So you need to create the opportunity for them to come back and willing and to come back without too much issues. So that's one. And then the other one that I realized that after I become partner, I finally had an aha moment. My aha moment was, you know what, when somebody said, oh, you have a tough job. I said, you know what, I don't have a job anymore. Because what I do is no longer a job. A job is what you get paid to do something, whether or not you like it or not, right? What I do, I truly enjoy. I truly enjoy helping my clients. I truly enjoy understanding their intellectual property. I truly enjoy doing planning. I truly enjoy learning all the things in different industries, different clients, life science, TMT, software, media, you name it. I learn so much. I enjoy helping, right? And it's a team effort. It's a lifelong learning. So I no longer have a job. Everything is easier. So to me, it's never a balancing act. It's more about today you focus more on one thing, and the tomorrow, like today maybe focusing on motherhood, and tomorrow maybe focusing on something else. But it's a balancing over a long term, not at any given time. And so when you don't think your job is a job anymore, is something that you love doing, then I combine them into I melt them into a pot. So basically I figure out the formula. It's a dynamic formula to mix work and life as one. So life is just a progressive and endless learning experience, and work is a nutrient, right? That enriches life. So it provides the content and make our lives more interesting and creates more opportunities, right? So what I did was when I was in Hong Kong, I have a lot of these experiences in Asia as well. My son had a chance to play in the Little League baseball, and we were representing Hong Kong, and we're playing in Guam. And here we have the Japanese team, the Taiwan team, and the China team, and the Hong Kong team. And there are a lot of Japanese parents there, and I showed up because I want to support my son. But they like, you're not alone. I was looked at as a very bad mother because I didn't realize when I signed up to join the baseball support team to see my son play that I had to also sign up for chores to do laundry and to buy food and to cook. And I didn't realize that. So they looked at me as very disqualified mother. I wasn't doing my duties. But I have to respect the fact that was the expectation. So I went in and helped out, but I also learned a lot about them, right? So I realized I can balance this by when I'm doing work, I just, bring my work along, but I also join the activities of the group and I can help out, and not all the way through, but still I was there. I didn't miss the home run and I didn't miss the game. So at least I do my part, may not be perfect, right? And then the other thing is these kind of things would continue. So at any given point in time, I think the weight is different, and then we need a broader help from the family unit. So when I had the event where that I need to host the Women in Leadership event in Hong Kong with the ambassadors and the governments, but my nanny wasn't there. So I have my 2 kids. My son, tall and strong, is 16. I said, I want you to help and set up the tables and invite all the gentlemen to the Women in Leadership event, because he was the only boy that we have. so he was doing that. I have my daughter being the MC. She was probably 5 or 6 or 7, something like that. So she would be the MC. So I make everybody work. So then they realized what I was doing, and they were having fun doing it. We're doing it as a family. So I didn't have to leave them at home with a nanny, right? So those are things that we have to create opportunities for them to be part of the action, and part of the solution, and part of the supporting cast. So I think my son came back to me and actually told me when he applied to universities in the US, he actually wrote an essay. He said the most memorable moment for him was Women in Leadership that I helped my mother with. So I was very proud of him, and to this day. So I thought, just to come back to the synopsis, I think we need to be creative, and we need to find a solution. And balancing work life, it's not a moment in time, but it's a long process. But how do you balance, and how do you get your support within the family unit or the community would be more important. Back to you, Tina.
Great,
I
thanks.
just have a really short comments on this, and I'm just very, very curious. If we make a documentary of women in leadership, and I would like to have another angle from our spouse and our kids to talk about this. Yeah, just I'm curious, what are they going to say, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, their perspective is different. Could be different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, I would love to watch that documentary if, you're going to make one. Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Deb, Lake, and Lili for sharing so genuinely and with so much detail. And now, and sorry for our attendees, now we have shortened the Q&A time, but let me check. Yeah, I do see that in this Q&A box and in the chat, we have a lot of questions here. Let me see. Okay, I'll first prioritize maybe the Q&A box. So, so first we have a question from Ran C. Hey Ran, if you are here and you would like to speak to our speakers directly, you can raise up your hand and our colleagues could unmute you. But for now, I will just read out your question. So Ran has a question for Lake. And he asked, what's the difference of working in the industry between working in an academic environment? Do you see any gaps between the industrial practice and school studies? And if yes, how do you fill the gaps?
Yeah, so apparently I think this is a very different environment. So particularly in the academic environment right now, you still have, I would say, sometimes once you are a tenure professor and you have a guaranteed job, right? And if I use my industry, put on my industry hat, I would say there's no incentive, there's not an incentive for continuous, sustainable, outstanding performance on that. So that being said, I think the academic environment is changing as well. So particularly, I think my title is adjunct professor at CMU. So I think particularly in the change of, there are more and more adjunct professors who currently holding an industrial position and work as a part-time professors at the universities, because in this way so the adjunct professors actually, because we continue to work in the industry, we can bring the newest knowledge, the network, the resources, the other speakers bring into the class. We can continue keep the course refreshed every year, every semester, based on change of the environment. I think it's very important. The other thing is a lot of adjunct professors really don't care about being a tenure professor or salary, or we have to write a lot of papers to make sure that we continue to move up the ladder. But so we can actually really focus on teaching, because that's why we're there, right? So that's the change number one. And change number two is that with online learning platform like Coursera, edX, and all these different Udemy and all the different platforms out there, as we can see, the more and more informations are being put in online and make accessible for people who in the past cannot afford it, or have to go through specific test or admission process to get that knowledge. And now not only those information online, but also more and more information are from tier 1 universities, very great professors, and also sometimes they're cut into bite size, right? So you don't have to finish the whole full year, 4 years, or even 2 years master program. You can just take a mini program, take an online part-time at your own pace. So I think that is really huge innovation, pushing education to results driven, because honestly, as people who have graduated from decades ago from university, I would just speak very honestly. There's very little knowledge I learned back then in the undergrad. I can still use it immediately now, and more transfer into how you think, right? How you think of different things and different perspectives, and I think we should continue to focus that. We should enable students to think, to create, and to conclude, and also transfer knowledge from one industry to another industry, from one technology to another technology, because that learning ability, that adaptability is the most important thing for them, because everything is just going to change even faster, accelerate change. Yeah.
Thank you, Link.
Yeah.
And I actually saw a very interesting question, and from a very important person, perhaps. So it's from Eric Yuan. So he has this question for all the panelists. Hey, Eric, are you here? And do you want to talk directly about to our panelists about the questions? If you are willing to, please raise up your hand. Yeah, I'll just read it for now. So from Eric Yuan, the question is, what's your experience like to build a new team from scratch when transitioned to a new leadership role? What are the important things for women leaders to do that first step right? And what are the potential pitfalls?
There's been a number of studies that's been done that said that women leaders who come into an organization are seen more negatively than male leaders. They gave teams bios of a person coming into the organization, and these were fake, but they said, and they were exactly the same experience with just different names on it. And the feelings of the employees were much more negative about having a woman leader come in than a man, which is not wholly surprising, I suppose. Sad but true. And so if you think about that, right, I think coming into a new leadership role, you are facing already some kind of questions around your competence that you might have to actually make changes in the leadership team, maybe even clean house and have a new leadership team brought in. That is a very big challenge when you're already facing some skepticism. And I think it's done, I think it's hard, right? You are navigating the fine line between kind of warmth and competence, as well as making fast decisions and moving things forward. And I think that each time, especially when you go into a team, you have to evaluate, make decisions, and move. And yet at the same time, know that it might not be very popular. And so I think the important skills you must have is empathy and then the ability to really bring in people that are going to accelerate. Because at the end of the day, people want to be on the team that wins. They want to be at the company that's doing well. And so, even if in the short term it's painful, making the hard calls is actually the most critical thing, because in the end, if your team or your company doesn't win and it's not doing well, nobody will have a job at the end.
So I want to let Lili speak on this first. Yeah.
No, I thought that was very well said. I'm not sure that I have too much more to add to. And again, I go back to the cultural point, just because I've been in the US so long. When I was shocked when I went to Asia and how Japanese do them differently, and in Hong Kong. And I think a little bit of understanding where you're walking into before you make your moves, and certainly build your consensus a bit more than in the US. But once the decision is made, I think the transition has to be fast and crisp. You cannot drag it on for too long, just to make sure you have every single vote. I think making decisions, being decisive, is actually one thing that we can do better. As women, usually we spend too much time in consensus building, but we have to do some. We cannot understand what's going on. But once that's done, I think it's a decisive leadership. It's going to show confidence. It's going to build trust, and people would follow. Yeah.
Thanks, Lili.
Yeah. So I think we should move on to the next question, so we can cover as much as.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So next question from Vincent. So he said, a question from a male participant here. How would you wish male Asian Americans improve career-wise in the US? Yeah, gender is relational.
Well, there's a study from Ascend that basically says, in America, it's worse to be a woman than to be a man, and it's worse to be Asian than a woman, and it's worse to be an Asian woman. So, so I think that there is still a gap, right? It's better to be a woman in the majority than it is to be an Asian man, because you have fewer opportunities. And a lot of that has to do with just the way that, the culture looks for leadership, right? So that leadership looks a certain way. And I think a lot of us are acculturated a certain way as well. And I think that that's true for women and men. And so, but at the same time, I think for Asian men, like, there is not a lack of representation, particularly in tech, of, Asian men actually make up in some companies a plurality of the employees, right? 30-40% of the employees are kind of men and Asian men, right? And so, why are they not reaching the highest ranks of these organizations? And I think that, a lot of that is the systematic kind of challenges that we face with it, which is, what does leadership look like? How do we actually, bring together the kinds of qualities that people are looking for in leaders and actually have them exhibited? What are some of the challenges that we face in kind of speaking up and being present and looking, what does a leader look like? And, I think that it is not just an issue of women and Asian women, it is an issue for Asian men as well. And if you look at the people getting on boards, it is not necessarily Asian men either. And we talked a lot about women representation on boards, but, a majority of the board seats, even after, by the way, the state of California passed the law that I think Lake was talking about, this past year, they looked at the numbers of people being appointed to boards, and it was still a majority white men.
Yeah. So, I think Deb pretty much spoke about everything that I want to touch on. And I think that the one thing I do want to add is that, about in diversity, right? So there are more and more Asian groups and are working together than ever. So working together than ever in a way to how do we have the right representation in executive positions on board, or not only in, for example, in tech or business, but also in other public sectors as well, right? As policy being made, and you do want to have your representative on the panel of the decision makers. So I am optimistic, and then I think this is a timing that each of us, men, women, young or senior, we should all contribute to it and then encourage each other. So speaking out and help each other, I think is really important.
Well said.
Thanks, Lili. Okay. I mean, like, thanks everyone for asking these questions. And I'm sorry that time's up. So in respect of everyone's time, I have to like wrap this up. And if you have any questions, maybe we can like find channels always to talk and speak to our speakers here today. So, I mean, thank you so much, our speakers and our attendees, to join today's HYSTA Talk. And I think everyone should have some like concrete takeaways from this session. Like for me, I think like what Deb mentioned about being authentic, listening to your heart, and also as Lake talked about, like think about what's the things that you feel passionate about and what is meaningful for society. And also, as shown in like Lili's experience, like being brave, always forward, and fearless, while like moving across different cultural backgrounds and locales. So, and also I think it's also important for us to take away is like thinking about the work-life balance, not as something really like, oppositional to each other, but they are like a concrete whole, and you will always like enjoy more your work and life balance, your work and life while you are like enjoying yourself, being a better you, a better woman, and also you will be a better wife and mother. So, and yeah, very lastly, I think Lake's word said, nobody's perfect. So accept the true self. I think that's really, really important. Yeah. So when you be good to yourself, you will meet a better self of you, and also we will make a difference in the world. So thank you so much, everyone, for today's talk. And yeah, that's it for today. And we are looking forward to meet all of you in the future.
Yeah.
Thank
bye.
you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Deb, Lake, and Lili again. You are so incredible. Yeah.
Well, I also want to thank for the entire HYSTA team who has been putting this together. Again, HYSTA is a nonprofit organization. Everyone's a volunteer, right? So the team has been, Tian Yu and everybody behind it has been putting a lot of time to coordinate. I also want to thank Deb and Lili, and both of you are really, really busy. And there was no hesitation when we sent it over for this panel, and being very flexible, working with us on the schedule. So I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. See you next time.